Hello everyone and welcome to our Boost TOEFL New TOEFL IBT Complete Masterclass. In this video, we're going to focus specifically on the task Write for an Academic Discussion. I know a lot of you find academic writing really hard because you have to express your ideas in a very short time, right? But don't worry. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to deal with this new TOEFL task from every angle. So now, let's get started. Here is an overview of what we will cover in today's session. We'll begin with an introduction and basic test info. And then we're going to move on to the rubrics and score interpretation so that you will make clear how to get a satisfying score. And after that, we will dive into the template section, where I will share a high-scoring template and a template variation bank. This is to help you add some uniqueness and flexibility to your writing. We'll also discuss how to construct strong reasons and examples. And finally, we will put it all into practice with a real test question. So now, let's move on to the intro part. Let's first quickly review all the task types in the new TOEFL IBT. Please pay attention to the reading and listening sections. They are now multi-stage adaptive tests, meaning that they adjust difficulty based on your performance. Reading has up to 50 questions in 30 minutes, covering daily life and academic passages. And listening has up to 47 questions in 29 minutes, including responses, conversations, announcements, and academic talks. In contrast, the writing and speaking sections are not adaptive. The writing section includes tasks like build a sentence, write an email, and our focus today, write for an academic discussion, all within roughly 23 minutes. So speed is a must. Speaking involves repeating sentences and taking an interview, totaling about 8 minutes. So if you are new to the test, I strongly recommend you to watch my earlier videos first. I break down every single question type in detail there. I believe you can get a clear structure about TOEFL in those videos. So, okay, let's take a look at all the writing question types. There are 3 types in the new TOEFL, and we will focus on the last one today, which is Write for an Academic Discussion. It's basically just an opinion essay. You just have to read 2 people's ideas and then give your own. You have 10 minutes in total to read the topic and give your answer. So many of you find it very difficult to deliver a well-structured and logical essay in such limited time, right? Don't worry, that's why we are here to help. Okay, let's get a closer look at this task. Here is how it works. First, the professor will introduce the topic and raise some questions and key ideas. The topics are varied, but they're highly academic. Like here, the topic is volunteerism. And then 2 students will share their posts, expressing their opinions on the topic, and usually their opinions are quite different. For example, here, one thinks schools should require volunteer hours, while the other believes they shouldn't be mandatory. So your job here is to clearly state your own position and support it with strong, logical arguments. You can agree or disagree with both students. You can support one of them, or you can come up with your own opinion that's different from both. The most important thing here is you must make a meaningful contribution to the discussion. And your response needs to be at least 100 words long. Here, make a contribution to the discussion means you have to respond to other students' opinions. Remember, this is a discussion. You don't have to write a lot, but you must have a response. Now, let's quickly go through the rubrics. If we want to have a high score, we have to know how it is graded, right? So now, let's talk about how this task will be scored. First, the task is graded on a 5-point scale from 1 to 5. And your score will be based on 3 very important criteria. The first one is content. It wants to see whether your opinion is on topic, whether your opinion is clear, and whether your argument is well explained and well supported. It's not enough just to give a short answer. You need a truly contribution to the discussion. And the second one is syntax and vocabulary. That means it will check if you can use different kinds of sentence structures, not only simple ones, but complex sentences and compound sentences. It also wants to see you use appropriate and precise vocabulary, whether you can express yourself clearly. So, from this aspect, our template can help a lot, and we will discuss this in a few minutes. The third one is accuracy. This is about how few grammar and vocabulary mistakes you have. The fewer errors you make, the higher score you can get. And you can pause the video here and take a screenshot to check the detailed scoring criteria for each score level. And this is a conversion table between the 6-point scale and the 120-point scale. The 6-point scale is for the current TOEFL, and the 120-point scale is for the older version. Feel free to screenshot and save it. Please note that different sections have different conversion way. For example, if you score 28 in writing on the 120-point scale, that converts to 5.5 out of 6. But if you score 28 in speaking, that converts to a perfect 6 out of 6. Make sure you check carefully if your school has minimum section score requirements. Okay, here are some sample score reports. You can see your total score and each section score, both on the 6-point scale and the 120-point scale. You can also see there is a label called NS. It means no score. So you have to be careful. If your answer is totally off topic, you might get no score at all. Okay, now let's talk about score interpretation. Many schools and institutions around the world use the CEFR as a standard for language ability. So I want to show you how TOEFL scores connect to these CEFR levels. First, C2, which is the proficient level. To reach C2, you will need a score of 6 in every section. And next is C1, the advanced level. This usually requires scores between 5 and 5.5. Then we have B2, upper intermediate. For B2, you need scores from 4 to 4.5. Lower levels such as B1, A2, and A1 generally corresponds to scores from 1 up to 3.5. And if your school don't list a specific TOEFL score, only a required CEFR level, you can use this table to find out what score you need to hit. Most schools usually require a level between B2 and C1. Now that we've covered all the basics, from here, we're going to move into the most practical part, strategies. First, we will look at the templates, including a high-scoring template and a variation bank you can use flexibly. Then we will cover how to develop strong reasons and examples. And finally, we will do hands-on practice with a real exam question together. Now, to help you succeed in this task, I'm going to share a simple but powerful 3-step response strategy you can follow every time. Step 1. Analyze the prompt. You should spend about 1 minute and 30 seconds on this step. Your job is to understand the main topic clearly and then quickly identify and summarize the two students' different viewpoints. This is very important, as the task requires us to make a contribution to the discussion. Remember? So, a quick summary is what you need to do first. And step 2, plan your response. This step takes about 1 minute. You need to decide your own position, whether you agree, disagree, or take a balanced view. Then, you will choose your main supporting reasons to make your argument strong. When choosing your opinion, don't overthink it. Just pick one you can explain clearly and quickly. They don't care how deep your stance is. They only care if your writing is logical and if you elaborate your ideas well. And remember to always support your opinions with clear reasons. Later on, I will also tell you exactly how to do this. Step 3. Write and refine. This is the last but not least step. You will have 7 minutes to write and 30 seconds to check and refine. In these 7 minutes, you will use our template sentences to fill in your ideas, making your logic more solid and your structure more standard. And then take time to check for spelling, grammar, and small mistakes before you finish. Alright, let's cut to the chase. We're diving straight into the high score templates right now. So this template is exactly what I used in my own TOEFL test, and I got a perfect 6 in writing with it. So you can feel free to refer to it and use it for your own preparation. The structure of the template is really simple. We start with a general introduction, and the middle part are where you state your position and reasons. And finally, we have a simple conclusion. The black words you see here is all structural. You can use these fixed expressions every time. And later on, we will also provide some alternative phrases, and you can choose according to your own needs. It's like a DIY process. You can make your own unique template. While the red parts are where you need to create your own content based on the question requirements. Now, let's go through each sentence in detail. Remember how I said earlier that one very important step is to make a contribution, meaning you have to respond to what the previous student said. So for the first sentence, we're going to give a response by first acknowledging that others' opinions are reasonable. And then we present our own position. For the first red part, you can just find the student's name from the question and fill it in directly. The second red blank is his or her opinion, which needs to be summarized briefly. Then, we need to state our own position clearly. So for the third red blank, we need to decide what our own opinion is. Together, the meaning of the first sentence is, even though this person said something, my view is blah blah blah. You can see the first sentence both makes a contribution and states your position. And then the second sentence is where you explain your core reason direction. Remember not to write too detailed in the first paragraph. Just keep it brief. I've also provided some alternative phrases and sentences here. You can choose whichever you like. For example, you can use emphasis or focuses on instead of highlights. Additionally, for the I believe that in the green section, you can use the following alternatives. For instance, it seems more convincing that. You can choose based on your own level. If you type really fast, you can go for longer and more advanced phrases. Okay, this page also gives you some alternative expressions. For example, I've provided 5 different versions for the sentence, offers a more sustainable and impactful solution. You can use presents a more viable long-term approach or provides a more comprehensive response to the issue. I've also provided alternatives for this is primarily because for your reference. You can see that some words in the template are quite challenging, right? This is mainly because of the scoring rubric we just talked about. Your vocabulary and sentence structures shouldn't be too simple or repetitive. That's why I've provided so many different expressions for you to use as references and choose from. Of course, you don't have to memorize all 5 of these. Just pick 1 or 2 sets that you like, practice them, and use them confidently in the exam. Let me give you another reminder. Make sure to practice your typing skills thoroughly and try your best to avoid typos in the exam. And since these template parts are things you will use every time you write, you have to practice them extremely well. That way, during the exam, you won't have to spend too much time thinking about the structure, vocabulary, or difficult words. Next, we come to the Body 1 part. In Body 1, we elaborate on our reasons in detail. There are 3 sentences. First, we point out the key impact, and then we explain things in depth. And finally, we gave a specific example. As you can see, this structure builds up gradually, starting from the basics and moving into more depth. This fits perfectly with the well-elaborated criterion outlined in the rubrics. We start by introducing our main point, then break it down with explanations, and finally back it up with a specific example, taking things step by step. Also, as you can see, here I used 2 words, specific and concise. So when you are describing your examples, you need to explain the cause and effect as accurately and briefly as possible. Please make sure you don't write in a fragmented way, jumping from one random sentence to another. Instead, your writing must have a clear structure and logical flow. But don't worry about this part. We will go into detail later on how to come up with a proper example. Similarly, I've also provided some alternative expressions to replace to begin with and directly contributes to. You can choose the options based on your own needs. Here are some other expressions for you to replace. In practical terms, this means that. And for example, feel free to pause the video here and take a screenshot. All right, everyone, let's move on to Body 2. Since we've already clearly and logically presented our stance and opinions in Body 1, Body 2 will serve as a supplement to our own position. As you can see, we've written second dimension here. That means this is a further extension of the point we've just made. At the same time, in the second sentence, we will point out the limitation from the opposing views, which once again responds to the contribute to the discussion requirement stated in the rubric. The main focus of this paragraph will be discussing the outcomes from personal and societal perspectives. As usual, I've got some extra alternative expressions for you to use instead of additionally and has broader implications for. You can also pause here and take a screenshot. Also, here are some other ways to say unlike and allows to. Alright, let's move on to the final paragraph. It's actually just one sentence that summarizes our position. And we will also highlight the core issue, which is the central issue we've been discussing. As you can see here, there are extra expressions for you to pick and choose. Feel free to pause the video, take a screenshot, and just pick one or two phrases you are comfortable using. Okay, now that we've gone through the template, we're going to take a deeper, more detailed look at how to support your points with solid reasons and strong examples. Let's start with how to give reasons. When explaining your reasons, you can follow this cause-effect deepening logic. You need to state both the cause and its effect, so there is a clear step-by-step progression. For example, education helps people get better jobs. Okay, this is correct. We all know that, right? But let's explore this further. How exactly does education help people find better jobs? Well, education first equips people with skills, right? And with these skills, it becomes easier for us to get good jobs. And as a result, once we have jobs, we can enjoy a stable income. So we can say education enhances individuals' skill set, which increases their employability and long-term income stability. This is definitely much stronger than just saying that education helps people get better jobs, right? And moving on, we can take this one step further, using more advanced vocabulary to concretely explain how education enhances individuals' skill sets. You can see the example on the slides. By institutionalizing skill development, education reduces reliance on informal networks and promotes merit-based advancement. This is how we build our ideas step by step, going deeper with a clear cause-effect chain. Have you got it? Okay, I've also prepared 3 other strategies for giving reasons. Let's go through them quickly. The second method is comparison-based reasoning. A common structure we here use is unlike. This is all about making direct comparisons. This approach works really well for questions that gave you 2 choices, like when the question asks whether education or networking is more important. Okay, the third one is short-term versus long-term. And as the name suggests, we can evaluate the pros and cons of something by looking at both short-term gains and long-term benefits. Similarly, when we compare 2 ideas, you can also support your reasoning by focusing on short-term and long-term outcomes. Let's see the example. So my stance is, education is more important than networking. And to explain it, the point I make is that While networking may bring immediate short-term results, in the long run, education is far more important. So you can see, comparing short-term and long-term effects is a really effective way to support your arguments. Okay, let's move on to the last method, which is called broad implication expansion. As you can tell from the words themselves, it's about expanding the scope. Instead of only thinking from a personal perspective, we can extend outward to a group, a community, or even society as a whole. You can see my example here. Beyond individual benefits, education strengthens institutional trust and social cohesion by promoting fairness in opportunity distribution. Alright, those are the 4 ways to support your arguments with solid reasons. In fact, you don't have to use all of these methods during the exam, but I highly recommend you practice each one thoroughly when you are studying normally. This will help you come up with reasons quickly and confidently on your test day. Alright, now that we've covered how to give reasons, let's move on to how to give examples. Examples usually go at the end of body paragraph 1, and they are really important in the essay. Based on my experience, the test actually encourages you to use specific, concrete examples. So now, let's take a look at how to give effective examples. On this slide, you can see 3 types of examples you can use in your writing. Each has a clear structure and purpose. Let's talk about them one by one. First, on the left, individual case example. This is perfect when you want to ground your argument in something real and personal. The structure is simple. You start with a specific individual, and then describe their specific action, and finally end with a measurable outcome. Let's take a look at the example. A student from a low-income background. Here is the specific person, right? Can secure admission to a competitive university through academic merit. And here we have a very specific action. And go on, thereby gaining access to opportunities that would otherwise be unavailable. And here is the measurable outcome. See how concrete that is? It tells us who, what they did, and what changed because of it. Most students may forget the outcome part. Please pay attention to it. Okay, next, in the middle, hypothetical scenario. Use this when you want to explore cause and effect. And the best part is that you do not need real-world data. The formula is, if some situation happens, then the consequence, and finally, implication. For example, if individuals have access to stable education systems, this is the situation part. They are more likely to develop transferable skills. This is the consequence. And then, which increases their adaptability in changing job markets. This is the implication. This type of example lets you project logic forward. Great for showing long-term impact or theoretical benefits. Finally, on the right, we have structural example. This is your go-to for big picture arguments, especially when discussing policy, society, or systematic change. So, how does it work? We start at the group level, then move to the social system, and conclude with long-term trends. For example, Countries that invest heavily in education often experience higher levels of social mobility as merit-based systems reduce dependency on inherited advantages. Notice how this moves from nations, systems, societal outcomes. That's the power of structural thinking. So remember, whether you are telling a story about one person, imagining a future scenario, or analyzing national patterns, each example type serves a unique role. You can choose based on your argument and always aim for clarity, specificity, and relevance. Great! Now, let's take a closer look at how these three example types work in practice. This slide shows you exactly how to apply each type, from broad societal trends down to individual stories. So your writing feels layered, logical, and convincing. First, at the top, structural example. This is your big picture tool. You're talking about systems, nations, or long-term patterns. Not just one person, but the entire population. And remember the structure we just talked before. Start with countries, and then move to public education systems, and ends with a social mobility. This kind of example is perfect when you want to show macro-level impact, especially for arguments about policy, equity, or national development. Next, in the middle, hypothetical scenario. Let's zoom in a bit. Not to a specific person yet, but to a plausible situation that could happen under certain conditions. The structures are as follows. If some action is taken, then what are the results? It's simple, logical, and forward-looking. Use this when you want to predict outcomes or explain cause and effect without needing real data. And finally, at the bottom, individual case example. Now we go all the way down to the personal level. One student, one story, one tangible outcome. The structure is we start with a specific individual, like the low-income student, and then the action, and finally the outcome. So here is the key takeaway. You don't have to pick just one. In fact, the strongest responses often combine them. Maybe start with a structural point, then illustrate it with a hypothetical, and ground it with an individual case. And remember, whether you are talking about countries, governments, or a single student, always tie your example back to your main argument. That's how you turn good ideas into good essays. Let's keep building on this foundation. Alright, we've finished going through all the templates so far. You might still feel a little confused, but don't worry. Next, we're going to practice with the real test question. So first, let's take a look at the official exam interface. On the left side, you will find the task requirements and the topic of the discussion. And on the right side, the screen is split into two parts. The top section shows the two students' opinions. And the blank area below is where you will type your response. Now, notice the four buttons here: cut, paste, undo, and redo. But please note, when using cut and paste, you can only cut and paste your own writing. You're not allowed to copy any words from the question or the passage. And on the right, you will see the word count. It updates in real time during the exam, so you never have to count words manually. And remember the word requirement for this task? Yes, exactly, at least 100 words. But for practice, I suggest you set a slightly higher standard. Aim to finish in 10 minutes with a minimum of 120 words. With more practice, your typing speed and idea generation will definitely improve. Alright, I will give you some time now. Please pause, read the question carefully, and think about your ideas first. And then we will see how to apply what we've learned from the template. Okay, you should have finished reading the passage and the questions, right? Now, let's analyze the prompt together. So the first step we need to do is identify the main topic. I've already highlighted the main topic here in red. Take a look and see if you find the same one as me. So the question basically asks us to discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of technology. But it has already set a specific context for us. It must be related to education. Make sure you always connect it to education. Okay, so now let's see students' opinion. Clearly, Kelly and Paul hold different and opposite opinions, right? Kelly thinks using technology in education is beneficial, while in contrast, Paul believes it is harmful. Regarding the opinions of these two students, you can either support one side and argue against the other, or you can say both make sense. However, I recommend that you choose one side to support. It's just much easier to write. A neutral position can sometimes be hard to develop ideas and examples for. Remember, this is an English exam. It doesn't test how deep your ideas are, so don't overcomplicate your thoughts. Alright, we're now moving on to step 2, plan our response. First, we need to choose our position. I will use my own position as an example to walk you through this question. My position is that technology is beneficial in education. I've also listed the supporting reasons on the right side. For example, my first reason is that it can provide inclusive and personalized learning. And the small notes next to it are examples I've thought of, like adaptive platforms or recorded lectures, which can meet different learning speeds. These are the keywords I will use later, so I can just list them here by the topic first. And you can also use this method of outlining your structure first. I highly recommend it. Planning your structure before you expand will make your writing much more logical. If you just write whatever comes to your mind, you might make mistakes later, and you won't have time to fix them. Trust me, the time is really limited. So, always plan what you are going to write first, instead of writing first and then trying to revise. Alright, let's quickly review the template structure on this page. You can try to fill in the parts marked in red in the template on your own first. And then we will go through it paragraph by paragraph. The upper part is the template, and the lower part is the sample answer I wrote, so you can refer to it. Okay, now let's start with the first blank. It's simple. We just need to write the name of the student who holds the opposite opinion. Since I am on the beneficial side, I need to fill in Paul. And if you take the opposite position, you should fill in Kelly. Okay? For the second blank, we need to summarize the opposing view. What I wrote here is, the risk of discussion, and reduced face-to-face interaction. This information is simply summarized from what Paul stated in the prompt, so you don't need to change it too much. Remember, just summarize it briefly. Okay, for the third blank, we need to fill in core reasoning direction. The keyword here is core. Since this is only the first paragraph, we will expand later. Alright, let's move on to body paragraph 1. The first blank is just our position. It's very simple. Then we will talk about the key impact. Here, I can directly use the phrases I thought of during the planning stage. So my first sentence is, to begin with, technology directly contributes to more inclusive and personalized learning experiences. Now, moving on to the second sentence. This is where we can clarify and expand on the first point. So I explained exactly how technology makes learning more personalized, using the examples I already planned earlier, like recorded lectures and online learning platforms. Okay, now we get to the third sentence. This is where we gave a specific example. You can use any of 3 example structures we just talked about to make it clear and natural. In the answer, I used an individual case example. I'm talking about one of my classmates. She used online math tutorials, and as a result, she significantly improved her exam performance. Okay? And just a very quick reminder, always include the result of your example. Don't just say she used online tutorials. Make sure you clearly show the outcome. And what's the outcome? Of course, she improved. So from here, we can see the importance of planning earlier. Okay, so always remember to plan your structure before you start writing. If you want to use the other 2 example styles instead, I've also got some handy phrases for you here. Let's take a look together. So the structural one is the big picture example. We're not talking about one student or one class. We're talking about the entire educational systems. Let's look at the structure. It starts with educational systems, which is a group level, right? And then moves to digital platforms expanding access. This is a social system. And ends with students from diverse backgrounds benefiting, which is the long-term trend. So this is macro level impact. Next, in the middle, we have hypothetical scenario. Here, we're imagining a plausible situation. Let's see the structure. If students have access to learning platforms, this is the if condition. Then they can review at their own pace. This is the consequence. And then, which increase their better understanding of complex topics. This is the outcome. So as you can see, this type of example is perfect for explaining how something works. And the last one is individual case example, which we covered on the last slide, so I will just skip it for now. Alright, let's move on to body paragraph 2. Body 2 has 2 parts. First, we further develop our main argument. Second, we respond to the opposing view and stress the positive result of our own opinion. So the first blank is still the same, the use of technology. And the second blank is our second reason, educational equity and long-term skill development. This is our extended point. Alright, the second sentence points out the limitation of the opposing view. I mentioned that Paul only focuses on the short-term problem, which is classroom distraction, but fails to consider the long-term importance of technology in society. Okay, so now let's quickly wrap up what we've covered. We'll restate our position, which is I support the use of technology in educational settings. And we will re-emphasize our key claim that it effectively enhances educational outcomes. And now, we've finished the whole task. Congratulations! Alright, this is our sample answer. You can take a screenshot or pause here to read it carefully. This essay is 165 words. When you practice on your own, pay attention to how much you can write in 10 minutes. In a real TOEFL test, always watch your time. Don't run out of time and leave it unfinished. This is very important, okay? And this is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. And of course, after finish writing at home, always check your grammar and spelling. These are points you really cannot afford to lose. Okay, let's quickly wrap up today's lesson. Here is our 3-step plan for the academic discussion task. Step 1, analyze the prompt. We need to identify the topic and summarize both students' views. Step 2, plan your response. We need to pick a side and choose 1 to 2 strong reasons. Remember to plan earlier, okay? And step 3, write and refine. Don't forget to use the template. And once you have done the typing, always remember to check spelling and grammar. Don't skip this. We also talked about how to give reasons and how to give examples. I hope you really understand and absorb these methods after class and put them to good use in your actual exam, okay? And don't forget, practice makes perfect. Be sure to practice as much as you can outside class. If you'd like to practice alone, feel free to share your writing in the comments. Alright, that's all for today. If you have any questions about the TOEFL exam or any thoughts about what we covered in this video, feel free to leave a comment below. See you in the next video.